Toronto's war on crime.
I'm Detective Graff. This is Detective Bateman.
The worst offenders are pursued by the detectives of the Specialized Criminal Investigations Unit. These are their stories.
Hello everyone, it's Brian here, and today I'm going to do what I hope is a fun video. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. I'm going to call it Songs About Toronto in scare quotes. You might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, I think it's songs that are set here, that reference Toronto, that are somehow about Toronto. So that's the idea. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I made a list, quite a long list of songs that would qualify, and there's too many to put in one video, so as usual I may have a second part or a third part. We'll see how it goes. There are a number of songs about Toronto that I don't own, so this is just what I have in my collection. These are all vinyl, but I will include some CDs next time around if I have to. And I think it's something that's pretty cool. If you guys should do it for your own hometown if it hasn't been done before. So now oddly, I'm going to start with 2 instrumental tracks. You may be thinking, how can an instrumental track be about a place? You know, maybe it can't, but it's not going to stop me from trying to put it here anyway. Let's start with 1978, a record I have shown here before, and this is Hemispheres by Rush for 1978, as I just said. Cool album design here. Many people know this record. It's not unusual or anything. There's the inside. Still has the poster. And you may be thinking, there's nothing in this record about Toronto. But let's look at the last track, La Villa Strangiato, which you might think is about a small town in Italy. And in fact, who knows what it's about? That could be it. I think Alex Lifeson said he had the idea for it, or the melody came to him in a dream, or the idea in a dream, and so they fleshed it out with some difficulty, I am told. Now, on the inside of this record, that song is given more description. So there's a subtitle called An Exercise in Self-Indulgence, and then there are 12 components to this track. So part 7 is called Danforth and Pape. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I can't even see if I'm showing. Yeah, Danforth and Pape, part 7. Danforth and Pape are 2 streets that intersect in the Greek area of Toronto, the Greek business district, or sometimes called Greek Town, on the east side of Toronto, across the river. Now, Bloor Street, after the Bloor Street Viaducts, changes its name to Danforth Avenue, what we simply call the Danforth. So Pape and Danforth is the Greek business area. So there's lots of Greek restaurants, and there is a Greek festival there, I think, annually. Taste of the Danforth, I think, is what it's called. Now, whether or not you can divine some sort of Greek influence in the 7th section of that track, or whether there's something in it that makes you think of Danforth and Pape, I can't say. For me, no, but I'm including it anyway because this is my video and I thought, why not? If that isn't enough, I'm going to choose another instrumental track, and this one's a little more relevant, and that's from this record, another record by Rush called Moving Pictures. Of course, I've mentioned this record before. One of the reasons I mentioned it was in a video about places I've been to that are depicted on album covers, and this is the Ontario Legislative Building, the seat of Ontario government, which I have cycled past thousands of times, maybe walked past dozens of times, hundreds of times maybe. And there's a triple entendre at play here. You'll see these workmen are moving pictures, hence the title Moving Pictures. You'll note that people are a bit weepy here because they're being moved, emotionally moved by what they're seeing. So moving pictures, the pictures are moving to them. On the back, we see that the whole thing is a moving picture. There's this film crew filming what's happening here. So a really interesting concept for an album cover. And you're probably thinking again, there's no mention of Toronto. The camera eye mentions New York and London. But third track on side A is called YYZ. And some of you will already know this. And I'm saying YYZ because I live in Canada. The song was written in Canada, I guess. The band is from Canada, so we say Z up here. We don't say Z, so stop saying YYZ. The song is called YYZ. Hot tip there. What is YYZ? Well, YYZ is I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, the International Air Transport Association code for Lester B. Pearson International Airport in Toronto. So what we call the Toronto Airport. Sometimes colloquially people call it YYZ. But it is the code that is given by the International Air Transport Association. But more than that, it's also a sound. So pilots, when they fly in, will hear what is called a VHF omnidirectional range system broadcast the YYC identifier code in Morse code. So what you hear at the beginning of that song, YYZ, that percussive tick tick tick, whatever, I can't do it, but you know that beginning of the track. That is the Morse code for YYZ, the Toronto airport. So, I guess you could say this is about Toronto because there was, Geddy Lee once said they were very happy when they saw YYZ on their luggage tags, which meant they were going home. So for me, that's a song about Toronto. And the album cover is about Toronto too. So, now, just indulge me one more time while I talk about Rush again. This album, Permanent Waves. And you may know that the lead-off track from this album is called The Spirit of Radio. And I have mentioned this before, so if you watch all my videos, and why not, you should, I've talked about the song and the meaning of that song. But if you haven't seen it, I will repeat myself here. But The Spirit of Radio is not simply a song about the wonderful idea of radio. It's about a very specific thing. It's about a radio station in Toronto, which is called CFNY 102.1, now known as The Edge. It's kind of a shadow of its former self, but back in the day it was known as The Spirit of Radio. It was birthed in Brampton, moved downtown, and if you look at the liner notes under The Spirit of Radio, you will see inspired by the spirit of radio in Toronto, alive and well so far. And my conclusion would be, it's alive, it's not so well, it's not really what it used to be, but it did make me think about that thread that's floating around right now, which is the 10 records that changed my life. I don't think I'll take part in that, but for me, the thing that changed my life musically was the Spirit of Radio, 102.1 CFNY, which is, in my opinion, the most important radio station that ever existed. Well, that existed in Southern Ontario, because it played songs that were totally unlike anything you'd hear on most other radio stations. The only exception would be some university radio stations would play things like this. So in the lyrics, he talks about the guy playing the song that's so elusive, and that for me means these songs you weren't hearing anywhere else. Talk about glittering prizes and endless compromises. We're talking about the fact that this is the opposite of that. This is back in the day when DJs programmed their own shows. Like the DJ decided what to play, pulled the records from the shelf, actually put the needle on the record and played it. In fact, CFNY made a point of never playing the same song twice, with one exception, and that was for a thing they called Catch Me If You Can, where they would deliberately play one song twice, and if you figured it out, you'd call in. They'd then have like concert tickets or a prize for you. So a really important radio station to me. I mean, the thing is that now in Canada, the radio stations are either owned by Bell Media or Chorus Entertainment. In Toronto, there's two radio stations that used to be arch enemies. Now they're owned by the same company, and they divide up the market. So CFNY is not what it used to be. It's kind of frustrating. On the other hand, its competitor at the time, Q107, is again not what it used to be. So they're all different than they used to be, and frustratingly, there's nothing like this radio station in Toronto or area anymore. So that's kind of sad. But that is an interesting track. I think it's great. And let's move on from Rush, because I spent a long time with Rush. But I'm going to come back to Rush because there's a little tie-in with this next record. Again, a record I've mentioned before. This is from a band called Max Webster, a band, not a person. Most famously, the guitarist and singer he sings most songs, is Kim Mitchell, who went on to a rather important solo career. I don't like his solo stuff as much as I liked Max Webster, but this is the debut record from 1976. You can see him mentioned on the back there. There are 4 members, but there's also an unofficial 5th member. His name was Pi Dubois, and Pi Dubois is a lyricist and poet, and he contributed lyrics to many Max Webster songs, including 7 of the 8 tracks on here he wrote the lyrics for. But let's just go back to Rush for a moment, because he actually wrote some Rush lyrics. So the song Tom Sawyer was co-written by Neil Peart and Pi Dubois. Pi Dubois also wrote a poem called Between Sun and Moon, which became a song on the Counterparts record that he co-wrote with Neil Peart. And also that poem itself inspired lots of songs on Counterparts. He also wrote the lyrics for Test for Echo. So Pi Dubois has this relationship with Rush, and so does Max Webster, because Rush would often take Max Webster on tours with him as an opening act. They performed together on Max Webster's final record, a song called Battle Scar. It's all of Rush and all of Max Webster on one track. So they were label mates, they were friends, and they pretty cool duo in concert sometimes. So Now, this is probably the wackiest song I will mention, and it's called Toronto Tontos, last track on side one. And this is a case where Toronto was mentioned. I don't think you could say this is about Toronto, but I had to include it because it's wacky and it's the first thing I thought of. Now, part of the lyrics are in French. I'm going to translate those French lyrics. I'm going to tell you some of the other ones in English just because it's kind of crazy. So in French, he starts out and says, "Hello, friends of misfortune, we are crazy." Which to me is a perfect introduction to the song because the song is actually kind of crazy. So the lyrics aren't going to give you the whole idea of how crazy it is until you hear it because the music is wacky too. By the way, they were sometimes considered a proto-prog band, sometimes compared to Frank Zappa. So he sings Radio Moscow, US Audio Bandits, Sweden, Solo, London, Soho, Candids. Free publicity is not free when it's public. Put down a little life from a morning cosmic. And Kim Mitchell sings it in a very strange way. It's not his normal singing voice. Again, we go back to the French, "Hello, friends of misfortune, we are crazy," and some other things. Put down a little life from a morning cosmic. Toronto Tontos, Vegas babies, transit, Arctic monkeys, frantic Spanish onions. Free publicity is not free when it's public. Put down a little life from a morning cosmic. And the song kind of rounds up by him singing, "I've got no fire on me, I've got no fire, no cigarettes, no matches." Crazy song. Maybe not about Toronto, but it always makes me think of it. When I think of Toronto, this is the first song that came to mind because it's just wacky. This is a good record, by the way, if you can find it. This is a classic Canadian beer store scene. If you had to buy beer, I think still it sometimes happens. We didn't have self-serve stores. You'd walk in, you'd ask the guy for a 2-4 of whatever beer you were drinking, and they'd roll out on this conveyor belt like this, and you'd take it with you on like May 2-4 weekend. That's another Canadian thing there that you might not know about. Pretty funny cover that didn't translate. In the American cover, they used something else because I don't think that really translated. And now let's move on to two songs about transit in Toronto, if you can believe it. Again, I've mentioned this record before, Shovel Demons, Street Nicks from 1986, their debut record. A kind of a surprise hit. This song took off, or this album, because of that song, took off big time. It was kind of unexpected, out of nowhere, and that is a song called Spadina Bus. Now, Spadina Bus refers to a bus route on Spadina Avenue, starting at Spadina Station and going down, I guess, to near the exhibition place. This album cover is hilarious. Now, if you read that and thought it said Spadina, you wouldn't actually be wrong because that apparently was the original pronunciation, and there is a museum on Spadina Road, north of Spadina Avenue, called Spadina House. But anyway, this song name drops a number of well-known Toronto streets. It starts off, "Well, I can't cuss on the Wellesley bus. You can't go far on the College streetcar," which kind of is true because it ends at High Park. You know, the Yonge Street train is a real pain. That's the main north and the first north-south subway line in Toronto. You can't have fun on the York U run, which is different now because there's now a subway that goes to York University. The bus might still run, but it's now a subway. And the Ossington trolley is just a big folly. That's the electrified trolley route that runs down Ossington Avenue. I don't give a damn about the Bathurst tram, so I'll make a fuss about Spadina Bus. And he talks about the 77B on the TTC, TTC being the Toronto Transit Commission. He says the 77A would be okay, but he wants a 77B on the TTC. Hilarious. And again, a song that would, if you lived in Toronto back in '86, you would know it, because it was, I think this album won a Juno Award or something. Had some big international sales as well. This last one fell over. Because we're talking about transit, I thought I would throw in another song about transit, and that's from a band called Cottage Industry. This is their debut record from 1990 called Spin, and this is a rock band. I think before they made a record, they were more of a synth pop band, but they became a rock band when they put this record out. First track on side one is called "Waiting on the 505." Now, this is a fun song about waiting for a streetcar to come. So the 505 is a streetcar line that runs east-west along Dundas Street in Toronto, and the song starts with him. He sings "Going Home is the best part of his day." He punches out at 4 o'clock, and he's waiting on the 505. He talks about being there in the rain and and the sun, hoping that the driver isn't late. But then he sings, "I forgot my transfer, I don't have a pass." But he's asking the driver to let him on just this one time. So doesn't have a transit pass, doesn't have a transfer, which is if you paid at a different station, like you were transferring from the streetcar to a bus or the subway to a bus or vice versa, you take a transfer, you give that to the driver, show it to the driver, and he'd let you on. But he doesn't have one, so he's saying, just this one time, let me on, which is pretty fun. It's a pretty cool song. I can't remember how many records these guys did, but is there an insert in here? Oh, there is. Oh, it's a catalog for other things from this company called, what are they called? I don't know. Anyway, that is the last of this. I guess that was 6 songs about Toronto, and I will maybe do more. I have some of them will be on CD, but I'll come back at some point with one of these things where I do parts. So part 2 at some point. But thanks for watching.